Welcome to A New Perspective with your host, Pastor Mike Sherbino. So, you've just become a Christian, given your heart to Jesus, or you know someone who has, or even been witness to this miraculously important life event. Now what? Thanks to our guest today, Armstrong has literally written a book about it. I'm a Christian. Now what? A guide to your new life with Christ. Joining us with his own fascinating, heart-changing story for Jesus from the U.S. is a Canadian in America, author and speaker, Armstrong.
Welcome to The Perspective today. I'm Mike Sherbino, and I'm excited today to have Hollie Taylor with us. Hollie, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very honored.
You've got a list of accolades from podcaster, producer. You've done a lot of TV, you do a lot of radio.
Yeah.
We're going to hear about that in a few minutes. Why did you agree to come on the program?
Why not? I love good stories. I love asking questions. And, I've heard you're a fun person to hang out with, so.
I appreciate that. I'm glad we took a retake of that opener because now you've said something very nice. That's all good.
I learned my lessons.
You learned your lesson. Well, hey, you know what? We're talking about an important subject today. Before we get to it, though, tell me a little bit about your work with radio.
Yeah, I've been in radio for a little over 20 years now, and I am the station manager at Joy Radio in Oakville, just outside of Toronto. And I love just the opportunity to have different ministries playing and incredible stories being shared, great music, and I just get to sit there, and it's a conduit for God's word to reach so many people. And I don't have to do the hard lifting. I just get to have fun, but yet people are reached.
Where is it on the dial? What's the number, Joy?
Yeah, so if you're in the GTA, it's on the AM dial, 1250. That's the
1250.
number.
Okay, shout out to Joy, and I'm glad that you're here with us.
Yeah.
But I'm also glad that we've got an interesting guest to talk to. Armstrong is with us, and he's a Canadian, but living in the States. Like, I don't know, is that a defector or something?
I don't think so.
But Aaron, we're really glad you're with us, and you've written a book called I'm a Christian, Now What? And I want to unpack that with you, but first, thanks for coming on the program.
Really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, Aaron, just give us a little background of your own adult faith journey, because, it's not typical. You didn't become a Christian as a young child. Tell us a little bit of the story.
Yeah. So as quick as I can, because, I can go a really long time on that. I didn't grow up in a Christian home, so no real church experience to speak of, as a child through my young adulthood. But post-college, when I was already in my first couple of years of my career, a friend of mine who I went to school with, he had become a Christian, and he actually invited us to a program at his church called Alpha. And for those who aren't familiar, Alpha is a discussion-based forum to explore the essential truths of Christianity. So basically to understand what Christians believe, and depending on what God does through that, potentially believe that for yourself. So I signed up for this thing, and then I promptly forgot what it was. So specifically that it was not just one night, but that it was 10. And so I signed myself up, and my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, and we go to this thing, and they're like, "Welcome to the 10-week Alpha course," and she's like, "What is going on?" And I'm like, "I don't know this. I'm sorry."
You said you really don't know.
Yeah. So we go to this thing, and because, so I was very open to these things, I promptly fell asleep after every meal and then participated in the discussion as, an arrogant such and such would. And, so we went to the end of the thing. Fast forward a few months, I'm sitting on the couch of the house that my girlfriend and I had just purchased. And it happened to be 2 blocks down from what was then a Christian bookstore. And I was thinking about this friend of mine who had invited us to this program. And I said, I like my friend, and I like making fun of my friend. I'm going to buy a Bible so that I can keep making fun of my friend. And this is what we do. So I walked down to the store. I go in, I buy a Bible and confuse the lady who was working at the store. I start reading it, and then Jesus makes himself unignorable to
Mm.
me. And there's a lot of stuff that is, a lot of stuff happens in between, of course. And I share a lot of it in the book, but because I don't want to take up the whole segment on just this part. um,
Well, let's jump in for a second because I know
yeah,
Holly has a question to ask, and maybe we can
yeah,
go with the weaves and turns as we unpack this story.
Yeah,
yes, please.
absolutely. So you have a Bible, you thought it was going to be a joke, but you end
Yep.
up getting saved. You become a Christian. So where do we start when you become a Christian and you're an adult? What next?
Well, I mean, honestly, the first question is now what? And because you have to unlearn everything that you
Mhm.
unlearn and relearn basically everything that you have ever experienced, to a degree. I mean, you're in this weird spot where you're the same person that you always were. So you have the same name, you have the same circumstances, you have the same job and obligations and everything else. But fundamentally, there's something that is very different and very new about who you are. Your
Yeah.
desires change, your purpose in life changes, your hope has changed, your fundamental identity as as someone who was separated from God, who was not part of his family, to use some of the metaphors that the Bible uses. um,
Aaron, let me
Suddenly
jump in.
becomes
Can
part
I
of
ask a
that.
quick question?
Yes,
How
sir.
long did it take you to figure this stuff out? Like, did it just kind of boom? Did the lights go on one day? Or,
No, it was a process. There was a lot of stuff. Like, so for example, I mentioned that, when I started reading the Bible, I already owned a house and lived with my girlfriend. Um, that and we both got saved on the same day within 12 seconds of each other.
Mm.
okay, saved. You
And
got to explain that big word, saved.
yes. Yes, I was just about to do that. So thank you. So what I mean by that is that so that for those who aren't Christians, that is a Christianish term that basically means that you have become a Christian because Jesus, who lived a perfect life for us, who died on the cross for our sins, he like in his act of his death and his resurrection literally saved us from what our sins deserve. So all the wrong things that we do and think and say and believe, that keep us apart from God.
So
So
who
when,
would you say
yeah,
then would be a good audience for this book? As obviously we're breaking down what salvation is. Who do you
yeah.
want this book to reach?
Honestly, I think this is exactly the right kind of book for people who were like me almost 20 years ago. It's for people who right now I mean, I think about Canada where it is beyond what statisticians and pundits here in the States refer to as post-Christian. So
Mhm.
this idea where there is enough background familiarity left over about Christianity, um, that the automatic response to it is antagonism. Canada, for the most part, again in those statistical diagnostic terms, is effectively unreached, meaning that it doesn't have a significant population that actually believes the gospel, and represents that in the world. And so Christians in Canada, in the same way that we do in many parts of the US, we do in Europe as well. We are in this place that we're almost what would be called a pre-Christian uh, society, in that there isn't really any familiarity at all. There's a pure ignorance in the truest sense.
Aaron, I'm going to
So
ask you to
yeah,
hold that thought. We want
yes,
to
sir.
unpack it a whole lot more. We're going to take a short break and we'll be back with Aaron Armstrong to chat about his book, I'm a Christian, Now What?
For those of us who follow Jesus, we have a book. It isn't a theology book. It isn't a rule book. This book is a story. The story of God and humanity. A story Jesus said he was fulfilling. This book contains poems, riddles, letters, puzzling narratives, and new ideas. Yet, throughout it all, this book is full of the breath of God. For those of us who follow Jesus, this book is a treasure. This book is a tree of life. This book is a page turner. Turn the page with us.
Well, thank you for staying with us. We're having an incredible conversation with Aaron Armstrong about you're a Christian now, what? It's an interesting thought, especially, Aaron, you were saying before the break that we are in almost a pre-Christian state with our society. And I'm curious about, we hear a lot of people saying they are deconstructing their faith. This book seems to be a perfect way of breaking down faith. Have you seen people use it in that way?
I haven't. What I've seen mostly is the people who are reading it um, are looking at it for how do they decide, how do they work through the basics of the faith with someone who is brand new to it, for the most part. I haven't seen too many people exploring this idea of deconstruction, which, depending on what you mean, can either be abandoning your faith, or refining it. Although if they want to use this book as a way to refine what they really believe, I think that's a great use for it and a very helpful thing for it to do.
Okay, so here's a question. You're living in the States now, and we're not going to hold that against you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm not going to go on a tirade there. I could have a bit of fun with that. But is there a difference in the States from Canada and their perspective on faith?
Yeah, so there is, it all depends on the different on the area. So I'm in the South. So I'm in Tennessee, where there's this Christian wallpaper that is on just about everything. And so there's a phrase that uh, Flannery O'Connor, I believe, is the one who said it, used it to describe the South. That it's not so much a Christ-centered culture as is a Christ-haunted one. So what that means is that it's not so much that people actively believe that God is real, that the gospel is true, or any of these kinds of things. It's more that they're afraid that he might be, and so they go through the motions. What we're seeing very rapidly down here, even in these kind of areas that are, you use language like Bible Belt and whatnot, we're seeing all of that rapidly fall away. And so people are just becoming more honest about what it is that they actually believe or don't believe. And I actually really like that, because it gives us an opportunity to help people understand, no, this is what Christians believe. And it's not what you might see on CNN or on, Fox News or whatever TV station either is trying to scare you in one way or the other. Um, but there's something good and beautiful and true in what we believe,
So,
if you go to the source.
yeah. So as people are going to the source, what would you say is the most important thing for a new Christian to know about their new faith?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like I said at the beginning, that it does change everything about who you are. And that the things that we need to do are that are core to the core of what we are becoming when we become Christians is we need to spend time in the Bible. So we need to learn how to read the Bible and what it's all about. And fundamentally, that it is the story of what God has done in the world to um, have people meet Jesus, and be in relationship with him. We need to learn how to talk to God as we develop that relationship. And that's what prayer is. Prayer is fundamentally just talking to God. And so not having to worry about, special language necessarily or anything like that, but that you can just have a conversation the way that we're having right now.
Aaron, let me
sorry, go ahead.
quick question, because you're spilling this out. I got a flashback to when you first made that decision and became part of the family of God.
Yeah.
what were some of the changes that happened? Just rhyme off a couple of things that as God's Spirit began to speak to you, because that must have been a
Yeah.
cool thing.
Oh, it absolutely was. I mean, a lot of it was, and some of it was fast, and some of it was very, very slow, and all of it is still happening. But one of the big things that happened that was kind of an in between space type of thing was that, earlier when I mentioned that my girlfriend and I, we lived together. We had a moment a couple of months after we became Christians where God dropped a proverbial piano with an elephant on top of it on our heads, where we realized that the way that we were living was not his intention, and so that it was not that we were not living in a way that um, showed how much we love Jesus, especially in this particular area of our lives. And so we had to work with our church and our friends to figure out, okay, how do we honor Jesus in how we live, in our relationship? And so that that led to us working through some very tricky dynamics, and also getting our wedding date on the calendar for
Cool.
for May 27th of the following year. So
Obviously, being a
yeah.
Christian definitely has some of those very challenging moments. I mean, you completely had to shift your life. What would you say to a
Yeah.
new believer that says, I think it's just too hard? This is a lot.
I mean, first is yes, it is a lot, and I understand it's a lot. It's gonna be hard, but if if God is real, if Jesus is real and the gospel is true, all of that hard stuff that you're going to have to deal with as you become a Christian, as you figure out what life looks like as one, all of it is worth it.
Very cool.
Hmm.
Aaron, I want to thank you for being with us today. I mean, we've just, seen the tip of the iceberg as we were unpacking this subject. You've written a book called I'm a Christian, Now What? Now What? You can get it at bookstores anywhere. And thank you for being vulnerable, opening up what for some is a difficult conversation, but as all would discover who go down that road, it is life-changing, it is exciting, it is amazing. And we just wish you God's very best in your next adventure. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Stay with us. We're going to be right back as Hollie and I unpack some of the things we've been chatting about with Aaron.
This extraordinary ripple effect that we see, that how this gift has not only transformed the person's life who got the chair, but the family members, the caregivers, the whole community. Maybe now the mother can go and get a job because she doesn't need to stay home and take care of her child all day. Right now, more than ever, those living with disabilities in developing countries urgently need our support. With your help, we can change lives, one person at a time. Together, we can provide the transforming gift of mobility. Together, we can make this world a better place.
One of the things I love about that clip is that, Holly, it shows a man, and he was on the program a long time ago, who just felt called to do something because Jesus had changed his life. And he had a brilliant mind. He came up with a way to build wheelchairs that are so inexpensive, and they're going everywhere. And that's just one of the interesting things where God gives us a new purpose.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about our conversation with Aaron and the whole sense of purpose and what it means to follow Jesus. We actually, that part where he said, he and his girlfriend figured they needed to get married. What kind of stuck in your mind as Aaron unpacked his story today?
Yeah, sometimes I think, why would somebody want to be a Christian? Because it's very countercultural. It's completely different from what we're experiencing right now. As he had mentioned, there is a huge shift. It used to be easier to be a Christian. Everyone would go to church, whether they believed or not. It felt like 50 years ago. And so now, how do you make that shift that's not even supported by those around you and really follow Christ?
I think one of the interesting things is that, it's one thing to go to church. And as I've said before, you can walk into a garage as often as you want. It doesn't make you a car.
Yeah.
You can go to church till you're blue in the face. And I
Yeah.
thought when I was younger, they'd put a turnstile for me because I was in and out so many times. But the truth is, I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. There was something that was empty. There was something that was missing. And I look at maybe what I gave up. You have to tell me your story, but it just seems insignificant to what he has given me and the purpose, the joy, and the peace that I have. What about you?
I gave up a lot. I mean, I'm originally from Edmonton. My mom and sisters are there, so like some of my closest family members and friends. And to move to Ontario to do a new job, to pursue a different calling,
Because God was calling you?
yeah. And it took 3 years to make the decision. And it just felt like this was what we had to do. And we made a very tough decision. And it was odd how much peace we felt.
That's very interesting because my wife and I made a similar decision. Most of our kids live on the West Coast. And it's kind of like fishing. They blessed and released us.
Yeah.
They said, Dad, Mom, you need to go do this. And we
Yeah.
came to Ontario and planted a church. And we now have launched this ministry. And desperately miss them. Look forward to family get-togethers whenever we can plan it. But saying it's almost insignificant in compared to what God has given to all of us. It's just huge.
Mhm.
I'm going to be talking about dilemmas in just a minute or two. We're going to do a whole series this week on dilemmas and decisions that change our destiny. You ever had a dilemma?
That whole situation was a 3-year dilemma.
3-year dilemma?
Do we stay? Do we go? But yeah, it's fun to look back on.
Well, I just want to tell everybody to stay with us. We're going to be right back as we unpack over this next week dilemmas, decisions, and how it impacts your destiny.
Hi, I'm Rachel Joy Barbeau, founder of I'mChangingTheNarrative.org. Check it out, I'mChangingTheNarrative.org. Also, former national sportscaster, and I've got a book coming out I'll tell you about in just a moment. But I want to invite you to recognize the people in your life. Are you ready for this? That spoke to you like a winner before you were even winning. Woo, boy. The people that recognize the winner in you before you were outwardly winning. What if today you sent those people a message, a text, a card, hired a skywriter, just kidding on the last part. But if you let them know, hey, thank you for speaking to the winner in me and seeing something in me when I didn't even love myself or I didn't feel like I was winning. And maybe conversely, because somebody did it for you, you could find people in your life, in your workspace, in your church, in your home, that you could speak to like a winner, even though they aren't winning at this very minute. I'm telling you, it'll revolutionize your life and somebody else's life. And if you love to read, make sure you pick up a copy of Relentless Joy. Pre-orders matter, and you can grab it wherever books are sold. I would absolutely love if you would grab a copy and would love to hear from you and see how the book affected your life.
Have you ever had a dilemma? I'm sure you have. I always smile at the story of the lady who was at work. She gets a call from the babysitter. And the babysitter says, your daughter is really sick and you need to come home and get some drugs at the drugstore to break the fever. And so she does that. She rushes into the drugstore and wouldn't you know it, she locks the keys into the car. And as she comes back out, she realizes the situation. She's panicking. I got to get home to my daughter. She says, oh God, will you help me? Will you help me? And she remembers that sometimes you use a coat hanger to unlock a car door. She finds one, which in itself was a miracle, but she doesn't know what to do with it. In the midst of it, she's praying to God for help. And suddenly this grizzly looking dude rolls up on a motorcycle. It's one of those chopped out ones, and he pulls into the parking lot. He sees the woman fumbling with the coat hanger, and he said, do you need help? Hesitant to say yes, she finally did, and she handed it to him. She said, do you know how to use this? And he goes and he takes the coat hanger, he twists it in a certain way, and he pulls the lock, and it opens up. The door opens. She says, oh, thank you so much. You are such a wonderful young man. And he said, I'm not so wonderful, ma'am. He said, I just got out of prison yesterday for car stealing. And she said, oh, God has really answered my prayer. He just didn't send me anyone. He sent me a professional. And I kind of laugh at that story because her dilemma, of course, was solved, but maybe we wish that our dilemmas were solved so quickly and so easily. I want to think today about what it means to deal with our dilemmas. And your dilemma is not, in the morning when you wake up and you say, what should I wear? I had 5 daughters and I remember them saying that in the morning. What do I wear? I don't have any shoes. and the closet was jammed full of stuff. Well, the passage we're going to look at for these next several days is about Jesus meeting the people in the area of Palestine. And as he's doing that, he is teaching, and they know that he's gathering at a house. And people are there at the house, and they're thronging around because people had dilemmas. They had the dilemma of some of them were sick. They knew that they'd heard that this man could heal them. Others were looking for answers to life. And there was another group, there was religious people who were very cynical, and they were looking for ways to catch Jesus and put him in his place. And so as we gather in the story, what we find is in verse 17 of Luke chapter 5, it reads, one of those days he was teaching, and the people had come from every village of Galilee and Judea and from Jerusalem. Folks, we're talking a lot of people. And it says, the power of the Lord was with him to heal. And behold, some men were bringing on a bed a man who was paralyzed, and they were seeking to bring him in and lay him before Jesus. But they couldn't find a way to do that, so it says they went up the stairs at the side of the house, because many of the homes at that time were flat roof, and you could go up on the roof, which also is a sign that it was probably the home of a wealthy person, that it could accommodate a lot of people. We'll talk more about that in the next couple of days to come, but let's just back up to this whole situation, because there's a dilemma going on. And the dilemma is this: people are coming to meet Jesus, and they're wondering, would he meet their need? There's the dilemma of the religious leaders who are thinking, you know what, is this guy really true? But he's really cutting into our turf. People are following him. They're not going to be following us. And that created a lot of angst and anxiety in them. So much so that 3 years later, they would trump up some false charges and crucify Jesus on a cross. Think about that for a moment. But here's the other thing. This is the dilemma. This man had been paralyzed all his life. He wanted to get well. And he has some friends that pick him up on his mat and they bring him. And as they're looking at the crowd of people, they're thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to solve the problem? How are we going to get the man so that he is in front of Jesus? Because we can't get through the crowd. It's like being at a rock concert and wanting to meet your special or favorite musician, and you just say, yeah, there's 20,000 people in front of me. I just can't do it. But they were determined. And we're going to see in the coming days that dilemmas create opportunities for you to make decisions that will impact your destiny. And here at The Perspective, we want to encourage people to think about their destiny, to think about what it means to know Jesus. And as always, I want to invite you to make that step of faith, because you'll discover that Jesus is waiting. Just as we're going to see in the coming days, he was waiting for those friends to take a step of faith and bring their friend to Jesus. Something powerful when we come to the feet of Jesus. Stay with us. We'll be back tomorrow with more.